You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I'm Dustin and Tony is with me, and we are here to discuss all of the content news from December 13th through December 19th. There's not a ton of news as we get closer and closer to the majority of the holidays, and as I've said on other episodes, but just in case you don't listen to the other episode or you've never listened to an episode, we typically release episodes twice per week on Tuesdays and on Fridays. This episode is actually going to release a day earlier just because we're getting into, I guess, the holiday spirit and having a little bit of extra time in between the holidays and when we're recording these episodes. So this episode will come out early, and we do have a number of additional episodes that will release over the next 2 weeks, but we'll actually be taking a break from all of the news coverage up until the first week of January, the first full week of January. So we'll be taking 2 weeks off. But in the meantime, we do have a couple of special episodes discussing specific topics that will release over the next 2 weeks. So let's dive into the content news from the past week. There hasn't been a ton, but there is a couple of things worth mentioning. So starting off with Netflix, the young adult book Game Changer is in development as a series. This is also being developed by Brian Yorkey. He previously was working on 13 Reasons Why. It's one of Netflix's most popular series. He's going to be working on this new series. This will be a drama series for Netflix. Then we've got Netflix in India. India's Viacom 18 has greenlit a trio of original series after the streamer's $400 million content pledge. Basically, they've got 3 new series specifically geared towards the Indian culture. There's one that is, I'm not even going to attempt to say the names because I'm just going to butcher them and I don't want to. But the first one explores the conflicts that emerge when a small town is identified as India's fishing capital. Fishing as in the internet fishing. There's a show called She, a gritty story of an undercover cop's journey discovering her sexuality and breaking stereotypes while taking down a drug cartel. And then there's another one called Taj Mahal 1989, a nostalgic exploration of love and longing. So previously Netflix had announced that they're going to be putting a ton of money into content specifically for India, and the reason why is because they're trying to compete with Hotstar, which we've briefly mentioned here or there, but the quick synopsis is it's a streaming service, very, very, very popular in India, and is actually part of Walt Disney Company specifically because of the Fox merger that happened earlier this year. So with all of that happening, Netflix is really trying to get into that market, and the reason why is because Hotstar has over 350 million subscribers. So we're planning on talking about Hotstar a little bit more in the future, but Netflix knows that India is a market that they can get a lot of subscribers from, but they do need to make a bunch of content for that area, that focuses on that area. So we've also talked about on the other episodes that they have a variety of different options when it comes to pricing. The pricing for Netflix in India is much lower than it is in other places because it's specifically meant to compete with the likes of Hotstar and even Amazon's Prime Video. So that's that. Then we've got Sweet Home, which is a Korean horror cartoon that is going to be adapted for Netflix as well. They also have a number of the cast members have announced. Nobody that screams out as somebody that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean there isn't. So you can check out the full details on that one over in the show notes if you are interested in that.
I really like this, Netflix's push into the India market. I mean, I know I keep, talking about that more and more, but from a business perspective, I mean, India's got over 1 billion people, and lots of them are emerging with, smart devices, and, you can watch more content, and it's kind of a big untapped market. But yeah, there are some competitors, and Hotstar is one of them that we haven't given enough credit for. We need to obviously discuss that more in the future, but I think it's good that, Netflix is, once again, they've consistently poured money into like Bollywood type content, but, them spending a crap ton of money with Viacom down there is just great. And so it's nice to see them just developing more content for that region and, competing against Hotstar, which it seems like, I don't know about you, we need to do a little bit more research in this, but it seems like Hotstar is pretty much the only big fish in the India market that they have to contend with. But other than that, it's pretty wide open. And so that's That's good. I think the one thing though with Netflix is they need to think about, especially with India, yeah, they're producing like TV shows and stuff like that, but they might need to consider maybe streaming some sports games like cricket, just because like how big that is. And I know Hotstar, they, stream lots of games. And so if they can do a little bit of that, they can definitely get a lot more subscribers in the India market. But overall, great job Netflix, once again, focusing on international rollouts and really pushing more into the India space and outside the US.
Yeah, we've talked about Netflix and how important it is. There was actually an article that popped up just after we recorded our last episode about the figures regarding the international market and how important the international market really is for Netflix, because the US subscriber base is kind of going stagnant, and with a lot more competition coming, it's not necessarily going to be the prime focus for the company if they really want to keep growing. So the international market really is, and they released some new subscriber numbers and revenue figures, and it really shows there is a giant boom and a desire for services outside of the US, and the US is not necessarily the only market that is important to a company like Netflix, even though it is based here in the United States. So it's something that is definitely important for Netflix, and this is, I think, like the sixth episode we've had about content in a row that has something related to some sort of deal in some other international market, whether it be Korea or India or some other Asian countries. It's very clear that they know that it's very important for them to get into these other markets. There's nothing for Prime Video, and jumping over to Apple TV Plus, there's just one little news piece, which is they have a LGBTQ docuseries that's called Visible out on television, which is set for Apple TV Plus. This is going to feature Wanda Sykes and Wilson Cruz producing the series. So there's that. Jumping over to Disney Plus, there was a Turner and Hooch TV series that is currently in the works from Matt Nix, who previously worked with 20th Century Fox TV, where he worked on a show called Burn Notice, which appeared on the USA Network, at least here in the States. Not a whole lot is known about the Turner and Hooch series, except for it's obviously yet another thing that Disney has as part of their back catalog of content. Turner and Hooch was actually a Touchstone Pictures. It's not something that they got from the Fox deal. That was a Touchstone Picture film project that was from the 90s, and that project, interestingly, it means that or I guess it was 1989. I stand corrected. It was 1989 that the film came out, starring Tom Hanks. But the intent is they're clearly going to continue this route of going after these older forms of content, which I just wanted to briefly talk about this, mostly because we've talked about how there's a lack of content when it comes to, geared more towards adults. At Disney Plus, a lot of the content that we see them producing or we hear about them producing in some way either relates to specifically the franchises that they have, whether it be Marvel or Pixar or Lucasfilm, meaning Star Wars, or we hear the fact that they're rebooting or reimagining these things that existed in the past. We just talked last week about Home Alone, and I'm guessing, and we see, at least in the theaters, a lot of the projects that they've been doing recently with, obviously the Marvel and the Star Wars stuff goes back to the franchises, but then we also have a lot of the live action remakes of the animated films as well, and they've been super successful. And I guess the question is, Disney Plus would allow Disney to take more risks, but it doesn't seem like they're taking any new risks. It just seems like they're taking smaller projects and doing the same thing that they're doing successively elsewhere. Do you think that could be a good thing or a bad thing ultimately in the long run for the service?
I get it in terms of they're playing it safe, and they're doing, with the launch of a new product, right? You want to build confidence around it, and especially from their shareholders, they're putting a lot of money into it. You have the opportunity cost of just partner with Netflix and keep things on Netflix versus doing it ourselves. So there's a lot of pressure for this to really catch on and work. And playing it safe is good. Kids content, people are going to buy it for kids content. So, that's a pretty simple thing going on. However, I think the Warner Media CEO that we talked about last week brought up a good point of how, Disney Plus is a good product, but they're not aimed at the whole entire age range of people, whereas an HBO Max is going to try to address all the different age ranges and, content, levels that people want and stuff like that. And I feel like for Disney Plus to take the next step in terms of market share, they're gonna need to dabble more into more adult content, but not like, super HBO Max, Showtime type things going on, but more things addressed for, an adult. And I think when WandaVision comes out and the new other show, the Winter Soldier, Falcon and Winter Soldier series comes out, those are two more shows that are gonna be aimed for the adults. But once again, there's not that much adult content, and it is going to be a problem. I mean, it just is. If they want to take that next step, then they got to take some risks besides just rebooting old stuff. I mean, I think nostalgia is fine, but when your business model is just all based on nostalgia, that's a little worrisome, because like, what if people aren't feeling nostalgic then? Like, yeah, I mean, CBS recently had a show called MacGyver, which, my parents loved, and, I like MacGyver too, but, not enough to keep watching the show, and that show got canceled, and my parents are pretty upset because, for them, they really enjoyed MacGyver, but, CBS was just playing off of, nostalgia type thing going on. And even though the show wasn't the same, it was similar tones of what MacGyver was. The point of what I'm trying to say is that if you just rely just on nostalgia to really kind of get you to the next step, I don't think it's going to translate well for the future. You got to develop new, interesting IP for these services. I mean, that's what Netflix is doing. That's what HBO is doing. That's what Apple TV is doing, even though one could say that they're a little bit less successful than these other players. I mean, they're making good original content in terms of like original ideas and stuff like that, and not just redoing and replaying and remaking just shows and shows and movies based off of like old stuff in the Disney Vault. Like, yeah, they can't rely on the Vault to get them to this next stage in the future. Like, if Bob Iger wants Disney Plus to succeed, they're going to take that next step. But for like the first year, I think it's fine to play it safe, but they're going to eventually need to start taking risks and expanding their library and really delving and really spending a lot of money into creating newer content.
I agree. It really just comes down to, they know that the nostalgia element is working, but it's not going to last forever. And that's, I think, the problem that we're seeing. A lot of the stuff that is not franchise-based is nostalgia. Lion King did very, very well in the box office because a lot of people grew up watching the animated Lion King. And there's other reasons why it did very, very well too. And I'm not trying to dismiss, the performance or the movie itself, but I'm just saying, I think the problem is all we're hearing about when it comes to actual projects, like we hear about a Home Alone, we heard about a Mighty Ducks, we heard about now, this Turner and Hooch. There's just a lot of things. Just a couple weeks ago, we heard that they were potentially bringing back The Proud Family, which was a cartoon on, over a decade ago. So it just comes down to they can't just rely on what already has been. They have to look at look at new ideas. And the problem is that even when you look at the Disney Channel, for example, or Disney XD or Disney Junior, some of the shows that they have are, if they're not based off of an existing franchise or an existing set of characters like Mickey Mouse or something like that, they've got a lot of shows on there that are taking ideas that were from something else. Like there was a show recently that launched on Disney Junior called The Rocketeer. Well, it was basically taking a 90s show or a 90s film and using the idea of what the character was for this new version of the character. It's something where you can't sustain a business off of nostalgia alone, and that's the thing. And while they have the franchises that will continue to bring in success for them, there's a limitation on how long the franchises potentially could last too, and we might see issues with, things in the future. We've seen a couple of Star Wars films that haven't done as well. That's not to say that that'll keep happening, but it's possible. If they don't make, as much money as the last one, that could be a problem for Disney, and hopefully they'll take measures to adjust their thing, because the problem is when you look at before they had these giant franchises and you look at the movies that Disney was adapting or or the original ideas that they had, they were not doing very well. I just had, I could just name a couple off the top of my head. There was a movie called John Carter and The Lone Ranger, and a lot of these projects that they did not turn out well in any way for them. Prince of Persia, they took an idea that existed from somewhere else, trying to adapt it within house to, make it a successful franchise, and it did not work. They have not had a lot of real great luck of creating their own successful franchises with characters. And let's keep in mind that while Marvel is super successful, Marvel's films were being created and they had that plan in place before Disney even owned them. So it's one of those things to really consider when you look at the success that Disney has had. It's not necessarily attributed to the fact that Disney knows how to create super great content that can make billions and billions of dollars. The movies that have made billions and billions of dollars existed in some way prior to Disney having them underneath their corporate umbrella. So I'm really hoping that they can, and Disney Plus gives them the opportunity to really take some risks and do some original things and not just do some of the same old things that they've always done. And I'm hoping that happens. But in the meantime, we will see. All right, so then jumping over to HBO Max, there's a new comedy in the works focusing on National Lampoon's vacation films. This has Johnny Galecki attached as a producer. He was Rusty Griswold in the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. He's going to be attached to the project as a producer. This is specifically focused on the Chevy Chase films, not just National Lampoon in general. So you're talking all of the Griswold ones, the European Vegas, the Normal Vacation, and then Christmas Vacation. So I think there was 4, and there was one that had Chevy Chase as grandpa in the film, and I believe Ed Helms was playing Rusty as an adult. That one did okay in the box office. Didn't do amazingly well, but it did okay. But a TV series could be interesting depending on which direction they take it at HBO Max. Also, in addition to that, we have Snow Crash is a TV series adaptation that is currently being developed at HBO Max as a drama series. This is based off of Neil Stephenson's sci-fi novel. We also have 12 Dates of Christmas, which will be a holiday reality series, a holiday dating reality series, an unscripted dating series that will follow a cast of singles on a quest for love in a winter wonderland. So they're, of course, going to be expanding the type of content. We already knew that they were doing unscripted content, but they have no problem doing dating shows as well. A lot of people don't know this, but Warner Brothers is actually, or Warner Media that is behind the highly successful Bachelor, which appears on ABC. So they have some ideas of how to create this content and actually make it successful. So if you are looking for a dating show with a holiday twist, it'll be around next holiday season. All right, so jumping over to other services, starting off with Hulu, Greta Thunberg there's a documentary featuring her, chronicling her climate activist global rise. That's currently there's no specific title for it right now other than the working title of Greta, but this is going to be following the 15-year-old student in Sweden who starts a school strike in relation to climate control. So there's that in the works. Over on CBS All Access, Star Trek Picard has been renewed for season 2, even though the first season doesn't debut for almost another month. Then jumping over to Quibi, there's a number of different series that have been announced. Quibi has announced that there's an animated series featuring Andy Cohen, popular from his time on Bravo. There's a revival of a show called Singled Out, which was a show back in the 90s on MTV. This is being redone for a new version. There's also Legends of the Hidden Temple, which was a Nickelodeon game show in the 90s. This is being reimagined for Quibi as well. And then finally, we have a show called Trill League, which 50 Cent and Lionsgate is bringing a black superhero series to Quibi as well. So this is not based off of any characters that exist in comics right now, but Trill League does parody many of the characters that are from DC Comics, and it launched back in 2015 as part of a Kickstarter campaign.
I mean, I guess my thing is, when is Quibi coming out so that we can...
April 6th.
Oh, okay. We keep, so we just ripped on, Disney for not having original content. And it's like when Quibi comes out, I feel like they're going to kill everyone with how much original content there's going to be.
It's true.
It's like, yeah, it's like every week there's more and more stuff, which is good, but they're kind of making the case for me to actually buy, I want me to check it out just due to how much stuff there is and all that. So I think it's a good business part for them. I think it's CBS All Access, because didn't they do the same thing with Discovery too, is they gave Discovery a second season before the first one came out?
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing with Star Trek is there's people who love it. And so especially with bringing back Picard, especially, Sir Patrick Stewart, Picard, that's going to make them money. So it totally makes sense why they're going to bring it back a second season. And it kind of shows you how much, Sir Patrick Stewart's really invested in this. It wasn't just like a one-off, like, hey, I just want to make some money. It's like he's invested for the long haul, which making a television series, I mean, this. It can wear you out, and Stewart is not it's a very diplomatic way to say this. He's not as spry as he used to be, and so to go through all that stress and work, it can be very taxing on somebody, especially of his age. And so it's good to know that he's in it for the long haul and making a season 2. And this is just good stability for CBS All Access. So they're just plugging along and doing their thing, not really kind of caring about what the competitors are doing. And, good for them.
Yeah, they're doing what works for their service and the people who are subscribing to the service. And I mean, let's be fair, CBS All Access, one of the two big polls for the service when they really they really amped up were the spinoff from The Good Wife, which was directed as a very specific audience, and then they had the Star Trek Discovery, which was obviously directed at another type of audience. And those are the two things that really brought people in. I'm unaware where The Good Fight is as far as whether or not it's run its course and it's done, or if it's still got more seasons. But I know Star Trek Discovery's is going, and obviously the Star Trek stuff is successful enough because now they're doing Picard. And let's be honest, Patrick Stewart isn't exactly actor that he was when they were doing Star Trek: The Next Generation, meaning he's a bigger actor. So he, to come back to a project that he previously worked on after he went and did a bunch of other stuff that, made him even a bigger actor, it says something, because that means, one, they had a really good story to bring him back, and want him, and he would want to come back for, but also they know that they need to treat this series as something that's more higher marquee because he's associated with it, because he is a much bigger actor than he was back when the original series, Next Generation that he was on, was airing. All right, so with all of that, we're going to dive into the new trailers. There's not a whole lot of trailers. There's actually less trailers than normal, but there's not a lot of new content that's actually releasing in the next couple of weeks. So that's part of the reason why too, because there will always be new content that releases, regardless of what time of the year it is. There tends to be just a little bit less around the holidays, and they try to just focus on specific big things. So, going through the trailers, Ted Bundy, Falling for a Killer on Prime Video is releasing on January 31st. The Gift on Netflix is releasing on December 27th. Dracula on Netflix is coming January 4th. You, Season 2 on Netflix is coming December 26th. Kevin Hart, Don't F This Up on Netflix is coming December 27th. Alexa and Katie Part 3 on Netflix. This is coming December 30th. John Mulaney and the Sack Lunch Bunch on Netflix is coming December 24th. And then The Degenerate Season 2 on Netflix is coming December 31st. So out of all these trailers, I can honestly say that there wasn't a whole lot here that I was super interested in. I did watch that trailer for You, and I know that the first season was extremely popular. It did kind of look interesting, but this trailer did a good job of at least getting some interest out of somebody who would not typically watch a show like that.
Once again, I'm not interested in really much anything. The Ted Bundy, that looked interesting, but I have a sucker for his story is very unique, and just the way how he operated, and how for a serial killer he was extremely likable, and how he had a whole bunch of followers, and even though there was very clear evidence of what he did and the crimes he committed, he commanded an audience and a following, and so that is interesting. However, am I going to go out of my way to see it? Probably not, but that is the most appetizing out of all these trailers.
All right. So, with all that being said, like I've said, over the next couple of weeks, there's a bunch of new releases. You can check out the new release calendar to see exactly what is coming out in the next couple of weeks. The big ones are You Season 2. There's Lost in Space Season 2. Dracula's coming on the 4th. That's a BBC production that's co-funded by Netflix, so that's going to be coming on Netflix in the beginning of January. So those are the big ones. There's a bunch of other stuff that's coming too. The Mandalorian's going to be wrapping up their season finales next week. So if you want to see what's coming out, you can definitely head over to the site, thestreamingwars.io/streaming. That will take you directly to the release calendar, and you can check out all of the different content that is actually coming out over the next month or so. All right, so with all that being said, that is going to wrap up this episode. You can follow us on Twitter and join our Discord to see all the articles that we are talking about here on the podcast, as well as other articles that we just come across that we find very interesting related to the streaming wars. In addition to that, you can also follow us on Instagram for all latest announcements related to new episodes. Definitely, if you haven't subscribed or if you're not following us on Instagram, please do, because that's where you'll find out in the next 2 weeks when there's new episodes, because they're not necessarily going to be posting on our typical Tuesday and Friday schedule because of the holidays and when they're happening. So be sure to follow us on Twitter and on Instagram, and you'll find out when we have new episodes. But if you're subscribed to any of the podcast platforms that we have the podcast on, as well as if you're subscribed to us on YouTube, you'll see the new episodes as they drop. But we do plan on releasing an additional 4 episodes over the course of the next 2 weeks while we are taking a break. You can leave us reviews on iTunes or wherever you're listening to the podcast. Those are always greatly appreciated. And be sure to send us an email at thestreamingwars@gmail.com. So for Tony and myself, we wish you guys a great holiday, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thanks for listening to The Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.